Thanks for tuning in to the Spread Your Wingspan podcast.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jenny.
And we're your hosts, two friends who immediately bonded over our secret smut addictions. So join us as we journey together through our favorite romance and fantasy stories and discuss all things kinks, female pleasure, taboos, and more.
Make sure to check out the show notes for any spoiler alerts and content warnings. We're happy you're here. Let's get to today's pod.
Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Sarah. I think you were really excited about our conversation today.
I am really excited.
I am too, but I feel like you've been wanting me to read this second book for months. It's been months.
Half a year more?
Maybe.
I mean, since I met you.
Fair.
But then, especially since we did our first podcast on the first book in this series, From Blood and Ash, which you enjoyed.
I did enjoy. I was also fatigued from the romantasy because we were at the end of our recording season. So I did enjoy it. But I think even in our episode expressed, like, I'm excited to reread this and keep going. And I'm even more excited that I kept going now. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite series.
Watch the YouTube for my reaction that I just had. Because I feel that way. And like, this is a popular series. People on Book Talk are like, if you read ACOTAR, if you read Throne of Glass, if you're reading Fourth Wing, read From Blood and Ash.
Yeah.
And yet, I also think it's kind of slept on.
Continue.
Because how good it is. Like, I think it's in some ways way better than the Empyrean series. I think in some ways it's way more compelling than ACOTAR. The writing, I think, is a comparable level. Like, I don't think she's reinventing the wheel in terms of her dialogue here. No. But the world building, the mythology, the action sequences, the twists and turns, like, and how good the relationships are. It's so fucking good.
It's so good. And you didn't say the one word I was waiting for you to say. Vampires. Which I almost interjected. I'm glad I didn't interrupt you. But I wonder if that's why people sleep on it. I don't think everybody is into vampires.
Yeah, and that's fair.
And like, we are. But I will say, like, even some scenes, I'm not going to get into book 3 yet, but I am already into book 3 because I'm so excited to keep going that I think I'm halfway through, if not a little bit more. But reading a vampire series back to back to back to back, I love vampire lore, but even I'm a little like, oh, how much do I love this blood play? Like, it's not, I'm not squeamish about it. It's just, it's not a quality I always seek out when I want to read sexual scenes. So I'm just having they're good and they're varied, and even taking out like the blood play, they're good scenes. So it's just like another layer to it, which is fun. But even for me, I'm like, ooh, do I like, it's kind of a lot.
It is. Yeah. Yes. And I think, like, again, we're binging this series, right? If we had read it as it was coming out, there would have been like years in between, and I think you wouldn't necessarily have that experience. But it is kind of the thing you notice when you're reading them back to back. Like, it's a lot of blood drinking. Yeah. But that's true of every vampire book.
Fair.
It's a hallmark of the genre.
Yes.
And I think she, in a lot of vampire fiction, because I read a lot, it's described as a pleasurable thing. Yes. Being bitten by a vampire. And that's kind of the end of the description.
Well, with the Atlanteans.
What she does is, I think she does a really good job describing how it is pleasurable. And it is kind of this unique, it's not like having your blood drawn, folks. Like, it's not something occurs in the transaction, the giving and the taking, that elicits a bodily response. And she just does a really good job explaining what that's like, which makes it pretty sexy.
It does. To me, it's almost like a drug. It's like a drug that enhances the experience, or at least Poppy's reaction to when, can I call him Cass now?
Yeah.
Okay. When Cass, initiates the biting, the way that she kind of sinks into it, it's like she's getting high. And so I don't remember if we've spoken about this, if we've talked about this in another episode, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, it's really difficult to read people write pleasurable recreational drug use in books.
We have not.
Okay, so then I'm just misremembering because you and I talk about so much. I'm just
I would love to. Can we slightly table that for later?
Totally.
I really do want to talk about that.
But I think that's why I really like it, because it's that's the added layer. It's like an enhancement to the experience.
Yes.
And I don't know if she's doing this intentionally or if this is just my interpretation of it. I don't know, but it's really nice.
Well, you had a good comp of, if you don't mind me sharing this, like kind of like an MDMA vibes, like
totally.
And I think that's a very fair comparison, and I think that's intentional. At least it seems to be the case in terms of drawing on a real world experience and then making it this fantasy mythological monster vibe. And then you can, when you're reading, you're like, I get it. I can understand how that would feel in my body.
Yes.
And I'm nitpicky about that with sex scenes. If I can't visualize where the limbs are, if it doesn't make sense to me in terms of like how it would impact my body, I'm going to get drawn out of the scene. Yep. I'm not going to be titillated. And that's what we're here for.
That is the one goal. That's the number one goal. The point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we super jumped ahead.
Yes.
Today we are talking about the second book in From Blood and Ash, titled Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. As noted on our previous From Blood and Ash pod, the titles in this series and the prequel series are confusing as hell. Okay? Because this is a Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. The prequel series is called the Flesh and Fire series.
Oh, God.
And there's bones and ash and blood and queendom and kingdom. And in a lot of these titles are really similar.
Did I misname the folder? I did. I called the folder Kingdom of Blood and Ash. That's hilarious. Which is funny because in our notes, guys, she has the actual title of the book in caps. And she doesn't usually do that. And so I was like, oh, because I didn't title our lovely organization properly.
That was not intentional. But my
subliminal.
Possibly.
I'm not insulted.
Possibly. No, it's really hard to keep track. So it's the second book in the From Blood and Ash series that we are discussing today.
Okay.
Spoilers/content warnings. Spoilers for the first two books, but because we are both on book 3 and I have read everything in this series, it's possible we will accidentally inform our discussion today with a bit of that information. We'll try not to, but just be awares. And the content warnings, as we said, blood play and blood drinking, both consensual and non-consensual. Some disability/disfigurement mocking, and then references to sexual assault and mentions of rape. So again, those are kind of important to character development, but they are not necessarily really delved into. They are really just mentioned. So if that's a triggering thing to you, from my opinion, you'll still be okay, but obviously proceed with caution.
Yes.
Okay. This is the longest summary I've written. And this is an edited version.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I had trouble. A lot happens in these books.
A lot happens in these books. I will refrain from sharing more of my opinion until the appropriate time. I will let you get through your beautiful summary.
Okay, here we go. Book 2 of the From Blood and Ash series picks up right where book 1 ends, with Casteel's unexpected, and frankly unwelcome, proposal of marriage to Poppy. While Poppy can't deny the crackling physical attraction between herself and the Prince of Atlantia, his betrayal, coupled with the truth of the Ascended and all the lies she was raised with, cuts too deep. Meanwhile, the Wolven, elemental Atlanteans, and dissenters all around her make their hatred of her quite clear. A fatherly figure from Casteel's childhood arrives, the ancient Wolven and advisor to the crown, Alistair. And though he is friendly and offers Poppy both kindness and advice, he leads the charge in sowing doubt about Casteel's and Poppy's intentions to marry. When the Ascended attack New Haven in search of Poppy, she sees their true cruelty on display, and she ends up caught with an Ascended who can't help but feast on her blood. Our badass girl saves herself, and soon after, the group travels to Spess's End, where Casteel has worked to reclaim old Atlantean land to solve his people's population troubles. Throughout all of this, Casteel and Poppy begin pretending to just be Poppy and Hawk, so they can have an outlet for their intense chemistry while still holding one another at arm's length. Poppy is also trying to figure out just who she is, and Casteel is convinced she is of an empath warrior bloodline, which sounds badass and is, but is worrying to all others, as those warriors were known as soul eaters and are considered highly dangerous, even though Poppy cannot eat souls and proves time and again her willingness to relieve the pain and later heal those who hate her. At Spess's End, Poppy and Casteel finally come together, recognizing that what is between them is real. They finally communicate, letting go of the false assumptions they've been holding on to, and being honest about their feelings. They marry, and their union is blessed by the King of the Gods, Nyktos, an event that hasn't occurred for hundreds of years. Immediately after they marry, they must face an attack of the Ascended once again. They win due to Poppy's courage and a timely save by Wolven reinforcements. Afterwards, the group finally arrives in Atlantia, and several of the suspect things about Poppy, her confusing powers, and her effect on the Wolven, come to a head when a group of Atlanteans lure her into a trap to attempt to stone her to death, and she discovers yet another layer of her complex powers. She is found by the Wolven, her traveling companions, Casteel, the king and queen, and queen, who removes her crown and mysteriously pronounces Poppy to be the true queen of Atlantia.
That ending, man, yes, fabulous summary as always. Your skill in being able to take all of those things, and even though it's a long summary, it's not too long. Very well summarized.
Thank you.
Yeah, as soon as I finished this book, I texted Sarah. I'm like, that fucking ending, dude. Like, it's wild. And the thing that starting book 3, which also starts hard and fast, is I was actually complaining to Sarah about. I'm like, baby girl needs to slow her roll. Like, give us a break. This series is very twisty.
Yes.
There's so many twists and turns, which I think is probably why you're like, why are people sleeping on the series? For people who really enjoy it's not always like the bait and switch, but some of it is a little bait and switch.
Yes.
Or misdirection or whatever. She does it very skillfully.
And people love that about Fourth Wing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think Rebecca Yarrow isn't quite as good at it as Jennifer L. Armentrout. Like, these cliffhangers aren't like, oh, you threw together a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
It's like, that was a plotted out, planned cliffhanger. And then where it kind of hooks back up again, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And again, I love Fourth Wing, so I'm not trying to shit on it here, but people love that about that series. And I'm like, this one is full of that. You never know what's really going on. Like, wait till you get into book 4, girl. You're going to be like, oh, what? Like, I thought I finally understood. Nope.
Okay. Well, and then, as you said, she had to then go and write a whole prequel series just to...
And the chills I got when I got to the end of that series.
Yeah.
And these things from every book started clicking together finally. And you start seeing the whole picture and you're like, holy shit. Like, it's masterfully done. I literally got goosebumps talking about it.
I love that you and I can react to books in this way, because I feel like I want everybody to be able to react like this to books, and not everybody does, and that's okay. It's okay if you're not an obsessor over books like Sarah and I. We're not judging you. We are a little bit, but no, I think that when you've read as many books as we have, and you arguably have even read more, and I've read a lot, I feel like I've recently gotten to a point where it's hard to impress me. And I don't want to approach books like that, because I don't always have to be impressed by a book. I can just take books for what they are. These books are impressing the fuck out of me. Yeah. So the twists and turns are great. The action is fantastic. But there's also like a sweetness to their relationship, which I love. It's very much Feyre and Rhysand vibes. They're not the same, but like, there's definitely some elements as to why I loved ACOTAR. It's their relationship, like the way that their dialogue, their interaction, how they come together sexually, how they are navigating the world when they, kind of collide together.
Their histories and how that informs who they are, what they learn, how they grow, and how they grow together. Very similar to ACOTAR. And I think you really believe that these people love one another, which is very similar. Again, I think that's why Rhysand and Feyre is such a compelling couple to us, is like, oh no, that makes complete sense. Yes. And Casteel and Poppy is like off the charts.
Totally.
As I said, we have a nice little text thread now going with our friend and probably our number 1 listener, Katie.
Hey, Katie.
Hi, Katie. Casteel is way more unhinged than, like, I think he's, Xaden, maybe Venom Xaden is a better comp to Casteel. Casteel has, like, the fastest temper. Like, Casteel is a murderous little fucker. And, like, in terms of morally gray, he's a great prince and a great king, and he cares for his people. Like, this dude is dark.
Yeah.
But he's, like, funny, and he's charming, he's coy, and he's caring. Like, this is a very real person, I think. And then same with Poppy. She is not, I think a lot of people's problem with Feyre is kind of like the Mary Sue vibe. And I think Feyre, actually people don't like Feyre in this series. Like, Lucian calls Feyre an asshole. You're like, she kind of is, you know?
Yeah.
She's not perfect, but I get that. And Poppy, her naivete, and her kind of awkwardness, her lack of social skills, and, you know, she makes mistakes. She makes even bigger ones going forward. Make it so that she is equally compelling and equally kind of not totally just this good guy.
Yeah.
Even though she is our heroine and she is good.
Yeah. So 2 things. Her being the heroine, like, I think that the first book does a really good job of setting her up. Like, her naivete and her missteps make sense because she was the maiden and she was so sheltered. So she's really newly emerged into being able to be an adult, to be a woman, to make her own choices and everything, which Casteel supports. And I love how that continues to develop, where he immediately understands, like, from the moment he meets her, that she needs to call her own shots. She needs to be able to protect herself. She needs to be able to defend herself. She needs to be able to be stepping into who she is. And I'm remembering now that at the end of book 1, when you kind of don't really know, like, is Casteel good? Is he bad? Like, what is going on? Because he's lied to her.
It's a betrayal.
Kept all of this. He has betrayed her.
To us as readers, too.
And to have it be so quickly resolved, I was pausing for a second because I'm like, is it resolved? No, it is resolved. Because for what we know in book 2, she forgives him and she falls in love with him and he falls in love with her. And, like, when he meets her, he's trying to kidnap her to use her for his own gain. And so that's something that they have to kind of discuss, but they very clearly fall in love.
That's why this book might be one of my favorites in the series, is I think that's such a well-earned arc. Mm-hmm. I think a more impatient author would have tried to have that happen sooner. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen till the final quarter of this book. And obviously, they're hooking up, guys. Things are happening. Like, there are vibes. It's not like they, like, you're not in a slow burn way, like, going to be like, oh my God.
Yeah. They're pretending.
But what you're talking about, like, the reason why they're pretending takes a while to resolve, as it would in real life. Yeah. It's really well earned. It's, like, such a juicy, slow burns usually happen in the first book. Mm-hmm. And it's like we get one slow burn in the first book, and then we get another version of it in this book, but we get a lot more sex, which is great.
Love that.
It's so well done.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually wasn't sure if that was going to resolve in this book. You know, because that's something that she could have dragged out, but given the events at the end of the book and, like, the way that it leads us to kind of those final scenes, I'm glad that it did resolve here. And I'm not going to jump too far ahead, but, like, it then allows book 3 to be a different quality of their relationship as, you know, things continue to happen around them that they have to deal with.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned that, because what I think is really dope about this series too is, ultimately, yes, the relationship is gorgeous. It's romantic. It's a great relationship. The sex is great. These books aren't about that, though. Mm-hmm. These books are about Poppy and Poppy's transition, Poppy's arc, Poppy's growth, what happens within Poppy, and how that relationship is part of that. And Casteel's a major character too. And there's other Kieran and, like, beautiful characters. But ultimately, I find this to be a very feminist series about Poppy. And the end of the book is about Poppy and not about Poppy and Casteel, you know? And again, I think it really excites me that she's this young, you know, not conventionally attractive, again, really uncomfortably naive and awkward at certain points. Like, you know, kind of this person you wouldn't necessarily see thrust into this role, where we get to track how that changes for her. It's so good.
Yeah. I mean, for somebody who was not able to really trust that many people in her life, you know, lost her parents really young, was thrust into this role as the maiden. You know, she had, I can't think, Victor. Yeah. You know, her guard, her protector, who was kind of like a father figure.
But also in cahoots with the Ascended.
Yeah.
So, you know, because he was a gorgeous person in her life, but he also upheld her imprisonment.
Yeah.
He did nothing when she got repeatedly abused by the Duke, you know? And so it's complicated.
It's complicated.
She obviously, I think for her, it's less complicated. For her, she's like, I love him. But Casteel and others are like, but he also kind of stood by while you were being abused.
But did he have a choice? You know, the Ascended also had this.
They would have killed him.
Yeah, so.
And that's kind of Poppy's point. She's like, they would have killed him and then he wouldn't have been able to protect me anymore. But then Casteel's like, but was he protecting you
Yeah.
if you were, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. So is this a good time? I want to talk about the difference between the Ascended and the Atlanteans.
Sure.
Is this a good time?
We could do it and then get into themes.
Yeah, because the way that the end of the first book, you're like, wait, there's two types of vampire. Like, what is going on? And then the way that that plays out in the second book, like, there are bad vampires and there are fantastic vampires from what we know so far. I'm assuming the Atlanteans are still fantastic, but to the point where one of the Ascended in the like comes to take the maiden back, and then he like becomes obsessed with biting her and actually bites her in the carriage, and she's like, this fucking hurts. It was not that sexy, drug-like, euphoric Atlantean bite. Like, I don't think I've ever seen an example of two different classes of vampires like this. Have you?
Not in this way. I do think the idea that a vampire can make a bite hurt or feel good has been done before. And Casteel says later, like, he chose to make it hurt. The Ascended have the ability to make it feel good. But they are more selective about that.
Oh, okay. So I missed that.
Versus Atlanteans, it's kind of on the whole a pleasurable experience. Yeah. The layers of how pleasurable that is also gets discussed. So there's like, it's a very intimate thing where you bite the person. Yep. So like wrist is generally least intimate. And when Casteel or Poppy at some points have to feed or drink blood, it's usually wrist when it's not with one another. And then when it's with one another, it's like neck,
all sorts of introductions.
Nipple, clitoris.
Yeah, it was a little
thigh.
That one.
That's when we're like, oh.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I understand. Also, can we please all agree we do not need to say bundle of nerves?
Oh my God.
Please just say clit.
Just say clit. Because you're saying elbow and finger and like nose. So the anatomy is the same with the same words.
Is somebody teaching her baby body parts? That's very specific, elbow.
I am teaching my baby body parts.
It might be a little, advanced for him.
But I will teach him the proper terminology.
I just thought it was very cute. The way that you were like, elbow nose. Literally have a little baby.
Literally from a baby book that we have. It's called the Pudgy Baby Book.
No, yes, so bundle of nerves. That's not, please, no it's not our down belows. It's not our, whatever. No, it's our clits, our vulvas, our vagina.
Yes.
Call it these. And then turgid peak. Please do not ever call my nipple a turgid peak. Ever. Yeah. Anybody.
Every writer has their, I think, things that they do that give us the ick with sex scenes. We even got there with Sierra Simone eventually, as we in our discussion in that book was like, I think that was Misadventures, the Misadventures pod.
Yes.
Where, when you read enough sex scenes by one author, you're like, oh, they can only really write it this one way. I hate fucking Sarah J. Maas's Slammed Home and Velvet Wrapped Steel.
Velvet Wrapped Steel.
Drives me crazy. You can just say it was hard and soft. Like, right? Like, there's all sorts of ways. Surprisingly soft skin on a very hard penis.
Yeah.
And then, there's Slammed Home just really gets me. But Turgid Peak agrees.
Turgid Peak is the worst.
It's like moist. It's like,
I could take moist all day.
Over Turgid
Peak. And these are, just Jennifer, somebody who shares your name, please. You don't need to say those anymore.
She does say nipple occasionally, which so you're like, so they do know the word. Like, because I think she says, like, I saw the bite marks around my nipple.
Like above. Oh,
anyways.
Yeah,
sorry, guys. I've been, at some point, nipples get bitten.
Yes.
And they're called nipples.
Thank God.
So yeah, agreed. Would just love if we could use proper anatomical terminology. And it is sexy. Like, it's not unsexy to say clit. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
It doesn't
or even penis. I'm not mad at a well-placed penis.
Yeah. I don't hate cock either. Cock is like the most commonly used one, probably. Yeah, cock dick, yeah. We can come up with, I guess, like alternates for clit in that way, but they just don't exist, as far as I know.
I mean, I'm sure they do. Sounds like a project for us for our bulletin board.
Yeah. Okay. We will research and get back to you.
We will report back. So anyway, back to the two different classes of vampires. That is fascinating to me because, we also have the Wolven. So we have these, I don't know if I want to call them werewolves, but it's kind of the closest, common thing that we have to describe, what the Wolven are. There's so much more.
And I was thinking about that this morning. And the difference really is that a werewolf is a human who is infected to transition to a wolf. The
okay.
wolven are wolves who were granted the gift of mortal bodies by a god. So they are wolves who walk around as people sometimes, versus a werewolf is a person who becomes a wolf sometimes.
Against their will, probably, because they're infected.
Against their will, yeah. And it's kind of this, like, the wolven very much retain their consciousness the same between forms. Like, it's really just, like, their forms changing in a shapeshiftery way.
Mm-hmm.
I might be, like, parsing in a way where you're listening to this and you're like, that's a fucking werewolf, Sarah.
But it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
If you read it, you're not going to be you're thinking about them as woven, truly. And again, I'm like, what an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Atlanteans. I think of them as Atlanteans, honestly, and not really vampires.
Fair. Though they do things that we think of vampires doing.
Absolutely.
But you're right.
Mostly just the blood drinking and then the longer lived life, but it's not quite
a vampire.
Correct.
It's almost the most fairy-like vampire.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It reminds me again a lot of the Throne of Glass Fae, who have the canines and bite. And then, you know, as I said in our previous pod on the first book, the way mythology comes more into this and the way we learn more about the gods in the prequel series, there's a lot of blood drinking there too. And so, but you don't think of them as vampires, you think of them as gods. And so again, I think it's really interesting the way she's taking a vampire and she's kind of, like, if it's a thread, she's kind of taking the filaments of that thread and spreading them out and saying, okay, what are the components here and how can I differentiate them? And just do something new.
Yeah. And the Ascended, they do refer to as vampire. So they are the closest to what the reader is going to think of as a vampire, where vampires in mythology are pretty scary. Like, they're not these very, like, I'm going to bring you pleasure. I mean, they do to their own end, you know, but it's usually to trick people or to kind of have power over people, not have this consensual, super sexy, physical relationship like the Atlanteans do. Yeah,
it's usually an embodiment of patriarchy in many ways and not used as a tool to demonstrate true feminist ideology, which is really what Casteel represents in a lot of ways.
Yes.
It's usually like having dominion over someone. You're right. Even if it isn't a pleasurable experience. Vampires just like owning people all the time. Like, that's just kind of that. They're like, you're animals, you're cattle to me, I own you. Even if I'm attracted to you or we have a relationship. It's really not the case here.
Totally.
Okay.
I don't want to jump ahead your themes. I want to make sure we hit those. And then I think you can guess what I really want to talk about.
I do. That's why it's the last theme.
It is.
Okay. And it's going to be... Okay. We'll get there. Okay. For me, book 1 is about self-discovery with Poppy. And book 2 continues that arc, but it's more about self-awareness and reflection. So she's like learning so much about the world in book 1. And in book 2, she actually for the first time has to kind of consider herself in a way she's never done before. And that continues in books 3 and 4 as well. She's like, oh, I actually have power and influence and I won't always do the right thing. And she kind of starts to understand herself even as things about herself continue to be very mysterious to her because nobody really knows who or what she is. And that's a very frustrating thing.
And it continues to evolve.
Yes.
Just when she thinks she's figured it out, she gets new information or somebody tries to kill her because they think she's something. And she's like, what? Why do you think I'm that? So yeah, the self-discovery, I wasn't even thinking about it that way of like, exactly what is she? What bloodline does she come from? Like, who were her parents? Like, there's this whole mystery around
she have these powers?
All of these things. What I was more thinking about self-discovery is like disentangling herself from being the maiden and just being in the world as hey, I'm an autonomous person.
Yeah.
But you're right. Just, you know, when you think about, you know, us taking DNA tests to figure out our ancestry, like she doesn't have that luxury. She's having to, you know, rely on other people. Some she trusts and some she doesn't.
And some people are lying and some people are telling the truth. And it's not always clear who's doing what.
It's very often unclear.
And they all have their own motives. And so she's kind of this pawn, but at the same time, she's constantly saying no, like she's constantly refuting people's desires to use her as a pawn. And that's very reminiscent of, again, her early life as the maiden. And so it's unfortunate that even though she's not in that prison exactly anymore, she's still the central figure that people are trying to manipulate for their own ends. And they won't ever really tell her why.
It's true.
And that's how frustrating.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of her self-empowerment comes from fighting that specific thing of people trying to manipulate her.
Yeah. Man, Poppy. Poor Poppy.
Yeah.
I mean, not poor Poppy, because she can fuck some people up.
Yeah.
But also, to really just be out on a cliff kind of on her own here.
Mm-hmm. And that's why Casteel is so lovely. That's why the relationship is so beautiful. Because he's like, I got your back no matter what. Mm-hmm. And like, when you have somebody in your life who, if you've been missing that in your life and then you finally have that, it's life-changing.
It is. Agreed.
So with their relationships, some themes are being honest with yourself and then being able to be honest with somebody else, right? Because like for them, it's like they have to really admit things to themselves first before they admit it to one another.
Which is a lot of the internal dialogue, a lot of the discussions between them in book 2. It's like they're both trying to figure out, how much do I share? How much can I let you in? Can I trust you enough? Yeah.
And that's assumptions versus vulnerability and honesty, really, as I'm talking about here. Like, it's easier to make an assumption about somebody else than it is to be vulnerable about yourself.
God.
Right? Yeah.
Truth bomb.
This isn't really like a theme. I guess it is, but like the idea of an empath warrior is so like feminism coded to me. In terms of just that, you know, that like the idea that like empathy is the most dangerous thing that exists. Mm-hmm. What a cool twist on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would love to make a D&D character as an empath warrior. Yes. I don't know if that's possible, but if it is, I'm doing it.
I mean, I don't know the rules of D&D. I'm like, do it. Self-doubt as a block to revealing one's potential. Mm. Fuck the haters. Trust yourself.
Yeah. Put that on a t-shirt.
And then I kind of said this before, but emotions as power. Emotions as a force.
Yeah.
And then 3.
Actually, can we pause there for a second? Yeah. Emotions as a force. So like Poppy's empathic abilities to one, like, you know, you learn in the first book, she's helping people who have been, is the term cursed or whatever?
Who have been like poison. Yeah. Like basically, but yeah, who have been bitten by the Ascended and are going to turn craven.
Yeah. So she eases their suffering
while they're compassionately killed.
Yes. But she also can feel everybody's emotions around her, which at times is very overwhelming. And I think it's interesting that she is able to figure out a way to have control of it. Like she can cast her empathic net wide, but then when she's overwhelmed, she can bring it back in. Or she can hone in on one person. She can hone in on a group. And, you know, she could use that. Or like her powers for evil.
Well, at the end of the book, she then figures out that she can project people's bad emotions back into them and kill them that way.
Fair.
And there are people in the book who are like, and that's why you're very dangerous.
But she's like, I would never use it for that. But she does.
It gets complicated. That's all I'm going to say.
I assume it gets complicated because the way that scene happens.
She is not an entirely, again, she's a morally gray character as well.
As people are.
Especially people in positions of leadership. Mm-hmm. Like, can you get someone who's totally good? Can we really get a Rhysand?
Can we have a cult for good?
Can we have a cult for good? Yeah.
No, but it's true. So, yeah, emotions as force / power is, I assume, is going to be one of the continuing themes of this series because of her abilities.
End of the prequel series. Okay. Yeah. Again, I find it deeply feminist. I find it dopely feminist.
Nice.
Like, if that's because it's such like a matriarchal idea of like the emotions, the emotional upholders of the community, the people who maintain kinship, right? And if that could be a weapon, what would that look like? You know, and it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, women are better than men, like, and no, women can't get corrupt. That's not what I'm saying. But I just think it's like, how could it taking something that's considered weak and viewing it through a lens of not just is it powerful, but it's deadly.
I'm also thinking of women as being like the moral compass of the community.
Yeah.
If your moral compass is skewed toward nefarious activity, then that's going to have a huge effect on the people around you.
Yes.
Hello, Republican Party.
Oh, yes.
Or like white women in the Republican Party. And
I can't wait for our book 3 pod because I've been highlighting so much shit. I'm like, this is literally our lives right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like all good fantasy. It reflects back the world to us. And a lot of good fantasy is about fascism.
It's true.
Lord of the Rings, like so much of it is. Like the history of fantasy books pretty much is about fighting fascism.
Yeah.
We
we'll
need
get
it
there.
now more than ever, you guys.
We do.
On a lighter note.
Yes. Okay.
Threesome.
So I am, this is probably one of the most exciting, titillating, teasing things that has happened to me in a book or a series of books in a really long time. Guys, Kieran, one of the Woven. There are scenes in this book, and I'm not giving anything away, but like the teasing continues in book 3, where I'm texting Sarah where I'm like, is she gonna fuck Casteel and Kieran? And then I'm like, no, don't tell me. I don't want to know. So I have never read.
I can't look at you.
It's fine. I've never read a romantasy series where there's been a threesome teased with a second male character.
But it's not.
So please, guys, if you know of any more, please send them my way.
Oh my God,
this is
please.
incredible.
Please. I want to also clarify. It's not just threesome vibes, it's throuple vibes.
Yes.
Which is exciting also on a whole other layer.
Yeah, because I hope that Casteel and Kieran have been intimate before Poppy even comes into the picture. Like I
want to spoil things?
Don't do it. But it's like, guys, it's like the most satisfying tease I have read in a really long time. Because you're right, it's more throuple than threesome because there's like emotional receptivity, there's emotional awareness, there's deep caring for each other. It's oh my God. It's so good. And I hope Sarah's like internally squealing because it does happen, but
I have a volcano of emotions. Don't want to silence me.
Bundle of nerves is darkening right now.
Using my skin to keep it inside.
So, I mean, maybe we don't, if you want to say anything, but we don't want to give anything away. I don't want you to spoil anything for me, but clearly we're headed somewhere.
I want to say
yes,
that this is an element of the series that some readers really don't like and is one of my fucking favorite things about it.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to say. I would love to remind you that I've said that when we get to the book 5 podcast.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Which, by the way, guys, we're potting every single book in this series and
the
prequel
series.
Yes. This is going to be the longest series arc I think we will do because we thought initially we could combine books 2 and 3 into one podcast episode. And then I started book 3 and I was 3 chapters in. I'm like, no way. I'm like, more has happened in the first like 5 chapters of this book.
It would have been a 4-hour episode.
Yeah. So, but I think that, I'm very excited for this possibility because what is it? 10 books? About to be 11 books? Because
the prequel series is 4.
So,
and then this one's going to be 6. So it'll be 10.
The way that already, because I'm in book 3, the themes are continuing. Like, it's so skillful to be able to pull things that happen from book 1 and be able to hold the emotional thread as the series goes. And not all series can do it well. Some of them, my criticism of a lot of series is that they are standalone books that just kind of have little Easter eggs from things. But I want like the full continuation. I want to feel like I need to remember everything that happened in every single book in order to like put it all together and really immerse myself in this world.
You could glue the backs of the book to the front of the book and create a super book and read it all the way through. I mean, you'd be tired.
Your wrists would
your
hurt.
wrists would hurt, certainly. Maybe a few paper cuts.
Yes.
It would be on theme.
Yeah.
And it's you could binge the shit out of it. Yeah. I mean, again, you might get sick of the blood play in that process. And there's a few things, as I mentioned, I think again to you previously, there's a few things that give me the ick, especially in reread. This is like my 4th or 5th time rereading this series in entirety.
This is a weighty series.
I just love it so much.
Yeah.
But you know, the amount of times that Kieran specifically says, that was an incredibly random question. And things like that. I'm like, again?
Yeah.
We just heard that 2 pages ago. When you're first reading it, I didn't have that experience so much. But on reread, I think that stuff sticks out to you a little bit more. And if you did binge it, you would be like, you know, so maybe that's a case for pacing yourself. Maybe this is like do 1 a month and like you have it as a little treat.
Yeah.
If you're a little like coffee treat. I don't know.
Or binge it.
Like
it's really good ice cream.
Or like it's blood.
Yeah, the one thing that is bugging me, and probably because I'm fresh off of Xaden Violet vibes, is like how Xaden calls her violence all the time, and Casteel is like, I love how violent you are. So it's
and
more
that
apparent
happened first, you guys. This happened first. he says, "You're a stunning, murderous little creature."
Oh, that was so good.
He says that, and he's like, "Yeah, you're so deliciously violent." Like, yeah. And by the way, Zading was written after this.
Yeah. But because, you know, I'm reading this after that, whatever influence, you know, this obviously would be the influence to the other, but that is starting to be, oh, like, Jesus fucking Christ. Yes, we know you like how she stabs you. We know you like that.
It turns me on. I'm getting hard that you're stabbing me. But it is fun that she's like, she'll viciously murder someone in front of him and be like, splatter with their blood. And they're like bleeding to death. And he's like, I want to fuck you so bad right now. She's like, you're disturbed. And he's like, I know. Let's do it.
But it's the whole blood play thing, like bloodlust and, you know.
And he's twisted. Like, he's unhinged. This man is so traumatized. And he talks about it. Like, this guy was held as a prisoner for 50 years. And he's lived a long life. So for some people that might seem like a blink. But that's about a quarter of his life. Mm-hmm. And he was kept basically in bloodlust. He was basically starved the entire time. For years, they wouldn't give him enough blood. Decades. And when they get to that point as Atlanteans, they lose their humanity, essentially. They become just hunger. And he says, like, most people don't come back from that. Like, most people don't remember who they were, don't get a sense of their humanity and self back. And he has somehow managed to, but it's a cobbled together self. Mm-hmm. He still is like, fuck the world. Like, he's still got this kind of like, fuck it vibe about him that is retained. And he was a much more serious and cautious person before that. And then he's kind of like, I'm cobbled together, whatever. Yeah. And again, I like that.
Yeah, it's true. His unhingedness is not without precedent.
Right.
Or like reason, I guess is a better way to say it.
Right.
Yeah. Like, he's survived a lot, and, you know, in some ways I think it grounds him in who he is, and in other ways he knows how dire the circumstances can be.
Yeah, he's kind of like, he's really like YOLO.
Totally.
Like, that's
he totally is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that way, it's kind of like frat boy vibes, but not really. Like, it's like, no, it's more like a murderous vampire vibes.
Yeah.
But he's our hero. He's not.
But it has some humor to him, which I think is what we're picking up on here. Yeah. Like, he's not a super serious guy, which I think Rhysand tends to be more serious. I am the ruler, and these people are my.
He's kind of a grump.
Yeah, he's a bit of a grump. Yeah. So it's not quite comedy, but it is humor.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a lot that's really funny in these books. Yeah, she writes humor very well. Particularly, you'll be reading this and you'll have moments where you laugh out loud, and that's delightful. Yes. You know, especially in the midst of, like, it could be in the middle of a really well described and scary battle.
Yeah.
And then something funny will happen and you're like, oh, you know, like,
wait a minute. Yeah. Where did these creatures come from? Who are they? What is their blood made of?
Yeah.
There's a lot that keeps happening.
The banter is great.
Yeah. And that's something we talked about in the first book. It's like they have modern banter.
Yes, which occasionally bothers me. And mostly in the uses of idioms.
I'm into it. I like it.
Yeah, like, well, like, there's a few times where Casteel is like, says like, "Are you for real?" You know, which is like, would they say that in Atlantis? I don't know. You know, but it's a shorthand way of bringing us closer to the crux of what's being said.
Yeah. So
it's kind of like a shortcut sheet to make something more accessible.
Yes.
You know, versus if we're reading more like high fantasy, you know, they would say like, swear to Malik or whatever, you know, they would use some kind of like their world language to say the same thing.
Yes. Or they would have a phrase that is just like the phrase of their world. That is, you know, the similar thing.
Yeah.
Idiom.
I mean, we've been talking about it the whole time.
Yeah.
Your reaction, is there anything to add?
No, other than I think we might have to record a pod every week at the rate that I'm reading these.
But that's fine.
That's fine. No, I was, as I said at the beginning, I think I was just fatigued on romantasy because of the pace that we were recording. And this was one of the last, if not the last episodes of our,
I don't remember,
of our first season.
Second to last?
Yeah. So I knew that I enjoyed it, but I also wasn't fully
ready.
I wasn't ready to dive into a 10-book series.
I was asking a lot of you, and what's made me so happy, is that as you read the second book, you were like, I know why you wanted me to read this. Like, because I really wasn't trying to be super pushy, but like, just because I know how good it is.
No, it's
like,
true.
But please read all 10 books.
Yeah, but we know, like, some, like, you can't always, some books are meant for a specific time. So, like, I knew we would get to it, and I'm very happy that it's now March 1st and we're here.
Me too, because you were originally going to read it while I was on maternity leave.
Yes. And then I was so burned out on romantasy.
But like, how good that you didn't, because now we're rereading it together.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I would have
about God, that would have been an awful idea.
And you wouldn't have been able
to talk about it.
I mean, you could have texted me and I would have been like, I'm dying, I haven't slept, I'm hungry, like, the baby's barfing on me.
This is way more fun.
This is way more fun.
But also, I think it was nice, just like talking about having a little bit of a break. Like, we could pod every week forevermore and be happy, but I also think that coming back together after having a break, like, and talking about what we want to read for this next season, it's been super fun.
It has been.
Like, it's nicer when you take a little break and then you just have to wait.
This is why we are okay with our favorite authors taking time to write the next books in a series. You know?
This is true.
We need inhales and exhales in life, you know?
This is true.
Yeah. We need the waves to recede and crash.
Can't be orgasming constantly. You need to rest in between.
As much as we might like to.
We still need rest in between.
Who among us wouldn't get fatigued?
Yes.
My reread thoughts in general are, I find this a highly rereadable series.
Mm-hmm.
One, because yes, this just appeals to me, but also because there's so much laid down that once you know more, especially once you finish the prequel series and you go back and you get to see it on the second time you're reading it, you would not have seen it the first time. It's deeply rewarding. And then you can kind of solve the puzzle a little bit more as well. Really great fantasy series do that. This one does it well. I find it to be rewarding. Mm-hmm. That's my kind of like general reread take.
Yeah. Well, we've also talked about why we reread certain things.
Yeah.
You know, the predictability is nice. I think it's a different way of using your brain where if you've read the series and then you read the prequel series, that gives you more anchoring in the lore. And then you can go back. It's like, even without that prequel series, going back and doing a second reread, you're going to pick up on other things. But then having that layer must be very intellectually rewarding.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I also like when I'm rereading, because I'm a very visual reader. I saw once there was like a meme or there was something going around the internet where it kind of showed like 4 stages of something being drawn, and one was like just really fuzzy, and it was just like something that was like fuzzy and orange, and the next one was like an outline of a shape sort of, and the next one had more detail, and the final one was like a very detailed picture, and it said like, which one do you see when you read? And a lot of people were saying 1, 2, and 3, and I'm like, I'm 4 all the way.
Oh yeah,
I see everything, which is why it really bothers me if something is not described well in terms of what I'm supposed to see, because then I spend a lot of my energy trying to piece it together and failing. And I'm like, what are other people's reading experiences like? I'm fascinated to know, if you're not really seeing it, what reading is like. Wouldn't it be so cool to be able to go into each other's brains for like a vacation? Maybe it wouldn't be vacation, but like for like a trip.
Yeah.
Or just like, what's it like for you?
Like going to Italy. Let's go to see.
Yeah. Oh, good luck. But anyway, so I have already visually mapped it, is what I'm trying to say. So when I'm rereading it, I already know what it looks like. I don't have to piece it together. So I just get to like go visit the scenes I've already painted.
Really good point, because that's how I read too.
Yeah.
I map things in my head, and I think when I'm like, if I've stopped reading, but then I'm just thinking about it, I continue to map things in my head. Mm-hmm. I build the whole world, the characters.
Like I have specific orientations of specific rooms that are described. Yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're in this room now, and then later they're in that room. Yeah, and this game looks like.
Wait, not everybody does that? Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. If you're out there and you're like, I don't read like that, please email us, and as to the best of your ability, describe what reading is like for you. I'm super curious to know.
That's interesting that we have the similar way of reading.
Well, yeah,
of course. But no, but so, oh yeah, okay, we could do a whole podcast episode about that. No, that's fascinating. Cool. Good
yes. Enough. Okay, and then final point, which I've talked about throughout, but like this series and feminism, especially in the ongoing conversation that's been happening of like, everyone's kind of shitting on romantasy. Not everyone, but there's this cultural thing of like, well, that's just porn for women. But then if a fantasy series is written by a man and there's sex in it, it's a fantasy series.
Yeah.
And like, yes, Game of Thrones, for example, the sex is cringy and bad.
Yeah.
And it's not that important to the book or the plot. The
and it's
relationships,
usually aggressive.
and there's often rape.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily romantic, but it's still a fantasy series with sex.
Yes.
So when we're getting down to brass tacks, it's just because it's being written by women that it's being denigrated. And that's deeply frustrating, especially when, you know, a lot of these books really support feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And so a way of cheapening our resistance to the patriarchy is to make feminism seem stupid, right? And to make the things that, you know, inflame our feminism seem stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Because a partner who goes down on you every time, makes sure you come, tells you to, supports you fighting for yourself, lets you speak, wants you to lead, wants you to have the power more than them, who, you know, takes care of you and loves you, but just as much as you take care of and love them. Like, I could keep going on and on and on. We all deserve partners like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not, oh, this only exists in the realm of fantasy,
Agreed.
you guys, right? And so it bothers me deeply when it's like that's described as porn for women. Oh, a partner who is a feminist is porn?
I mean, that would be some pretty fucking hot porn, but
Absolutely.
they're equating porn that men watch and just blanketing that to women wanting to get off. Rather than exploring the whole story that in the characters.
It's so much
and
more
than
than
the relationships.
And there's a reason it gets us off so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of all those other
Mm-hmm.
elements, right?
Yeah.
And then again, I just think this series of a girl to a woman. If it's like Britney Spears, I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. Like that's Poppy, right? Like, but she's not adolescent, and she's not disempowered, and she's not stupid. But it goes from like, I have been oppressed by the patriarchy to I've been freed from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of like shot out of a cannon, and I'm thrown into this whole world where I suddenly have power, but people don't want me to use it, or it's dangerous. And like, I'm just trying to figure things out as I go. As she kind of matures into this adult version of herself, which is, it's so rewarding as the series keeps going. I can't wait to keep talking about it. I just find it deeply feminist. Like, I'm like, how many books really out there start out from this naive place?
Yeah.
And it doesn't become, oh, you sexually awakened me.
Yeah. That's a good point.
It could be so easily to be more Casteel focused.
Yeah.
And again, it's more like he's like, I'm just here to support you, boo. You know?
And continue your sexual awakening. But it's not the Beauty and the Beast thing. It's not the Cinderella thing. It's not the tropey.
Which honestly, even
fairy tale
even more so
thing.
than ACOTAR.
Yeah.
Like, because it is really like Rhysand facilitating Feyre's growth.
Totally.
Beautiful. Again, love that series. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's not feminist.
Mm-hmm.
In its own way it is. But I just find this one particularly dope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Spice rating.
I mean, this one, they all get like progressively spicier. This one I think is a big jump from the last one.
Yes, because you add in the blood play, which I think is a kink.
And there's more of it. There's more sex.
And it's varied.
Yes.
Yeah, which actually, good point, because their first couple of sexual encounters are fairly vanilla.
They are, even though he bites her in the second one in the first book.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So spice rating for this one, I don't remember what my spice rating was for the first one.
I think we gave it a pepper.
A pepper?
Yeah, so I think this one is a solid 2, maybe 3? Maybe 2.
I would say 2, 3 if people aren't into blood play. I consider when people aren't into kink, so I would probably give this a 3.
Okay. 3. That's fair. But if you read books where people are choking each other out and doing sub dom, I almost got those mixed up, and things like that, like BDSM, this is going to seem very tame to you. So yeah, mileage may vary as always, but be warned, there is more sex, there is more varied sex, and the sex involves blood play.
Yes. Lots of biting.
So overall rating.
I feel like my ratings are just going to keep going up, so I don't want to aim too high. Look at this. It's an 8.
This is an 8 for me as well.
An 8. Yeah.
That might be the first time we've had the same rating.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you rate any of the books in the series as a 10?
Get to the prequel series, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Just curious.
You think I'm excited now? You think I'm hyped now? Wait till we get to the Flesh and Fire series. I think it is just one of the best things I've ever read, hands down.
Nice.
This is good, and it's like, holy fuck. And for some people, Poppy and Casteel is like god tier. Nyktos and Sara.
Cool. Can't wait.
Yeah.
I know, I want to learn more about Nyktos.
Oh, you will learn so much.
I just one more thing to mention. Have you listened to any of these?
I haven't.
So, Casteel has a slight British accent in the narration, which is amazing.
Because, like, I do kind of wonder, you know, like, they're from different parts of the world. They must have different accenture. The Kieran doesn't, though?
Not noticeably, but Casteel, because he is introduced in the first book, like, before everybody, it's, like, noticeable that he has
Is there a male narrator for his part, or is it a female narrator?
Same female narrator for everybody.
I don't always love that.
She does it well.
She does it well?
She does it well.
Okay.
I think she does it well.
Because I've been listening to Fourth Wing, or not Fourth Wing, Onyx Storm. Still getting through that. Even though we read it, I'm like, can I mine more out of this?
Yeah.
And the narrator, I know you like that narrator, but I find her male voice is really irksome. They're all the same to me, kind of. Like, there's not a ton of variation between, like, Xaden and, like, the random people on Hedotus or whatever the island is.
Hedotus, yeah.
Yeah, so bothers me. But I'm impressed by these female narrators, might I add. Also, I have an acting background, and I still cannot inflect in various ways, especially to create male voices. I could do, like, a little girl and an old woman and, like, some accents here and there, but I don't think I can do that as a man. So that's impressive. But I like them better when they are more like the graphic audio. Do you know about graphic audio?
I can't stand those.
I don't like the sex scenes in those ones because the sex noises.
Too much.
But I like hearing that everybody have a different voice.
It's too much.
You don't like that?
But I think because I've been consuming books as audiobooks for so long. Even when I was a teenager, I would go to the library and get the, those huge folding things of cassettes and CDs, and I would listen to the very first one I ever listened to was The Firm, John Grisham.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And I was like way too young to be listening to it.
Yeah, that's like, what a first.
But it was because I think it was either 4 cassettes or 4 CDs. Dating myself here. Children don't know what those are anymore. It was,
tapes and discs, young ones.
It's interesting when you think about reading on an e-reader or listening, how you don't have the physical marking of your progression. But I did have that because it was different cassettes that I had to put in. So by the time I got to the last one, I remember I was riveted by the story and how it all came about at the end. But so for almost 30 years, I've been listening to
one voice
narrators with varying success of talent. Or range of talent.
I have not heard a book narrated by a male where they're doing female voices yet. Have you heard
I definitely have, but I can't think of what has been
Are they
well.
bothers? Okay. Yeah.
There are some that are awful, like Kushiel's Dart. That's
a male narrator?
No. So the first trilogy is female, and then the second trilogy is male. But it's a continuation of the world, and it completely threw me. I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
It really took me out of it because he was so austere. He wasn't doing voices. So I think that the way that narrators narrate romantasy now is modern.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And whereas before they were literally just reading the book, not trying to add any.
Wow. If you work in audiobooks, actually I have a friend on Instagram. I'm going to ask her. She does audiobook production. I would love to know more about this, the history of audiobooks. That's fascinating. Or if you're a random person out there and you know about this, again, please email us. That's so interesting.
Because I can remember, I mean, maybe some did, because now I'm thinking of the Outlander series. That narrator, I think Davina Porter is her name, does all of the accents. She does different voices.
Right, you were kind of hyping
Scottish,
it up.
French, the whole thing.
Which, by the way, what an incredible gifted person.
Incredible. But the first Outlander book was written decades ago. So
okay.
I think things might vary, but I do remember listening to things that were written a long time ago when they were literally books on tape, not having them be all the different voices. It was literally just somebody reading the book to you.
But it wasn't acted out, really.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. Because for me as a visual book reader, because I tried to do audiobooks when I was younger, to help me like from a learning disability perspective, like a few of my teachers, like maybe this would help you. And I've always been a very good reader. It was more in terms of like test taking after the fact. And it was even harder for me. And I think because it was just like somebody reading the book versus I find it a lot easier to listen now when there is acting involved.
Which is why I prefer to read, especially romantasy this way.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I love that we took that turn because that's a really cool topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Again, audiobook listeners out there, either chime in on Instagram or email us. Oh, we would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps up book 2.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned for the next 8. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah, stay tuned. I'm so excited to keep talking.
Me too. All
okay.
right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Spread Your Wingspan podcast.
We would love to hear what you think about our topics today. Be sure to connect with us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You can find us on both with the handle @Spread Your Wingspan, and all of the links and more fun stuff are found on our website, spreadyourwingspan.com.
And if you have a book or author you want us to check out, send us an email at hello@spreadyourwingspan.com to tell us.
We hope you tune into the next episode.